Hey, I'm Sophia Li, and you're listening to STEWARD Podcast. So the number one question I always get asked on panels is, what's the one thing I could do for the planet? Getting locally involved in activism may seem like a lot, but one easy thing we can all do is to stop trashing our food. The bad news is that over 1/3 of food produced in the US is never eaten, and most of the food in landfills comes from residential homes. And food, it doesn't break down in landfills, so it ends up just emitting huge levels of methane. The good news is that there are better options than tossing food in the trash. There's a solution from every household, from composting to food recycling. I personally use Mill. It's a food recycler that handles peels, bones, stalks, and leftovers. I just drop in my scraps and it comes out as clean, dry grounds that I mix in with my garden. Visit mill.com/steward for more details. Okay, so it's Earth Month, but the current headlines are dominated by the economy, not the biosphere. So let's cut through the noise and talk about what should be front and center. Investing in climate and nature is good business. Let's get into it with our dynamic roundtable speakers today. We're going to talk about navigating change and strategically disrupting for a viable planet. All right, hi everyone. First things first, how would you describe your job to a 5-year-old? Lauren, let's start with you.
I would say that my job is to help people, adults, make better choices for the planet.
Ooh, okay. I'm into that. Yeah. Samina?
We help people buy special clothing, handbags from other people's closets. And we help people sell special items from their closets to other people.
Everyone's like, we're helping people. We're off to a good start. I would tell a 5-year-old that I tell stories for a living, and oftentimes the stories are very real. And sometimes you have to add a little bit of sparkle to make it more exciting, but they are still real stories. Marina?
I think I teach grown-ups how to be more conscious and help the earth in a creative way and through art. And sometimes I need to wear funky colors for 2 months in a row.
That's a great one.
So I help families think about how to grow, preserve, and do good with the money that they earn. And I help them sleep better at night, knowing that the decisions are made soundly. And if I could liken it to planting a seed, we want to help plant as many seeds as possible so that it can be a beautiful forest in the long term.
You could tell who has 2 kids and they're like sleeping.
Doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Who doesn't?
We're talking about playing the long game right now. There's political winds, a lot of shifts right now. How do we navigate these changes? And what's something personally that has happened in your life where life threw you a curveball and you're here now and it's for the best of it? I'm looking at you because I think because I feel like you're in it right now.
We did talk a little bit about curveballs. We were talking a little bit about how curveballs can sometimes change the trajectory of your career and, your career where you live. I mean, for me, I've had a few come up, but for example, I remember when I started my career in technology and then went into fashion. And when I was in technology, it was very much during the internet bubble craziness and the burst that happened. And I was living in Boston. I had no intention of moving, and our office shut down in Boston. And, I lost my job. And so there was this element of what do I do now? This wasn't part of the plan. And through that journey, something opened up in New York, which I had never thought about moving to New York. Well, maybe I dreamt about it, but I hadn't planned to move to New York City. And after a series of should I stay, should I go? I ended up moving to New York, and that definitely changed the trajectory of my personal life and my professional life. And I feel like I've had a few of those type of curveballs. And I feel like it's about knowing what you want and maybe setting your goals, but then also being flexible enough so that as life happens, you sort of ride the wave.
Ooh, I love the way that you said that. And I have to say I completely agree, because my journey thus far has always been about curveballs, reinvention, thinking outside of the box. I started my career in investment banking, and then I pivoted into the fashion industry, where I spent a few years running a women's fashion design house. And when I was in the fashion industry, everybody would ask me, what stock should I buy? What bond should I buy? How should I invest my money in my portfolio? And I realized that there was a massive void in the industry for wealth management solutions for fashion, retail, and entertainment clients. So I pitched the concept to Citi almost 20 years ago to launch and lead their fashion, retail, and entertainment practice, and the rest is history. So I took a curveball and I made it into an enormous opportunity by looking at the best of both worlds and creating something that was different and unique for Citigroup at that time. And now I'm in another curveball situation. I've just left an institution that I've been a part of most recently as their CEO of the private bank globally for 4 years, and I'm taking a garden leave at the moment to pivot into my next venture, which I'm very excited about. But again, I think those curveballs are the best opportunities to kind of reinvent and take different perspectives, angles to drive your progress forward.
I think everyone here is a person that thinks outside of the box. And for me, I saw myself being part of the fashion industry, but not agreeing to what the industry had to give, and I didn't feel like I had a voice in it. I was just following. So I did a campaign called One Dress to Impress, and it was really a personal challenge where I was like, I'm gonna wear the same red suit every day for 2 months to showcase that I'm part of the fashion industry and go against the taboo of repeating outfits, go against the taboo of this pressure that women specifically need to constantly look amazing and be on the latest trend and have whatever if you want to be part of the industry. So that kind of positioned me, kind of isolated me from the industry because it was punching the industry that fed me at that point. But I really believe that I could find a way in the industry to talk about how to be more conscious, be creative, educate, but also find solutions for people to join the messaging and join.
Love that.
It's interesting that you mentioned think outside the box. That was the slogan of my company, Packaged Free, for a while. And it was really kind of centered around this thinking where if the world is exactly what you want it to be, like if you're happy and you think nothing needs to change and everything is great, then continue doing things exactly the same way. But if you're not happy with how the world looks and how it feels and what people are doing and the equity and justice and everything, then you have to change things. And so you have to think outside the box and you have to be a bit of a contrarian and do things differently. And I think when it comes to curveballs, I think my whole career has been existing as a contrarian and seeing what don't I like in the world and how am I going to try to do something to fight against it. So I guess in a way I've created my own curveballs.
You are the curveball.
I am the curveball.
You're the curveball. You're the curveball to the status quo.
You didn't see me coming.
Yeah. Like today.
That's what we need, exactly.
Yeah.
But you also did it in such a way that it was so creative and so like people wanted to join your curveball. It wasn't like, I don't want to be part of this.
Not a curveball.
But yeah, 100%.
I feel like, we're talking a lot about adaptability, and when we talk about the economy, it's like highs and lows, but in nature, there's adaptability. It's like nature's like the most resilient thing. Humanity, we are nature. It is so resilient, so adaptable. And right now, it's Earth Month, but the headlines are just dominated by the economy. And the biosphere climate has completely left everyone's peripheral, but it's still here to stay. And we're here for the long term, and we're here to adapt and be resilient. And I think every one of us, if you're in a point in your career, resiliency is such that seed that keeps it going. I want to talk about the state of the industry in each of your respective fields. I think we're at such an interesting cross juncture where businesses have to balance environmental responsibility with also profitability, and oftentimes they don't go hand in hand. So how would you describe where the current juncture of your industry is?
Yeah, it's interesting because sustainability is something that I think should be a byproduct of any successful business. Sustainability means creating efficiencies, optimizing, and that should go hand in hand with profitable business, and I think it really can and should. But unfortunately, with this new administration, a lot of the kind of support that was being provided to companies that were doing a lot of the right things was kind of ripped out from underneath of them. And what's really interesting about right now is there's this moment where the companies that are in sustainability that will thrive are the ones that can find ways to create efficiencies, reduce frictions, but also in a cash flow positive or profitable way. And I think that's how it should be. It's been historically really difficult with carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide doesn't really have any value as a gas. Its value is in its staying out of the atmosphere. And so we've had to attribute a fake capital value to that molecule. Whereas other molecules that I focus on, like methane is the cornerstone in many ways of the American and the global economy. It's natural gas, and that's what powers our world.
But it's a wasted resource.
It is the most both utilized and wasted resource. Like upwards of 14% of methane that is extracted by the oil and gas industry is leaking into the atmosphere. That's 14% of potential lost revenues. There's a huge opportunity in there. And so I've been historically investing in businesses that help to capture that methane and utilize it as a valuable energy product, which we need to power things like data centers and AI and technology that will help drive humanity forward. But we can do that in a way where we're protecting the planet and preserving and supporting global economies.
Oh yeah, I'm like, that's true sustainability.
And I love that's a bit of an optimistic view, which I think we all need that, I think, because, I think, the administration has changed, might change again. I mean, this week alone, things have changed.
Every hour it changes.
Yeah, a lot has changed in the last week, and so I think there's a constant there. I'm in the resale space, so Vestiaire Collective, we're trying to fuse fashion, technology, and sustainability. And so there's some element of the fact that better business and more sustainable practices will, in the long term, even in the fashion industry, really actually be more profitable and help you sustain through a lot more. And I recently went on an executive lobby trip in DC, which I was quite interested in doing with the new administration. And we're part of ACT, so American Circular Textiles. They do a lot of lobbying and policymaking on behalf of circular fashion. And it's they work bipartisan both sides of the aisle. And it was interesting because, yes, there's definitely a different tone, but it's almost like the same problem solving, just positioned differently, right? So whether it's sustainability, sustainable practices, environmental impact, and or better business, better long-term profitability, better investment in customers and business, I actually left a little bit more optimistic because it did feel like we could get to some of the problem-solving solutions that we need. They might just need to be packaged a little bit differently.
It's also interesting in your space because with kind of the potential for very large global tariffs, all of a sudden things like luxury fashion or fashion in general becomes much more inaccessible and more for the super elite. And now secondhand and resale offers such an amazing opportunity to allow peer-to-peer selling and access to luxury products in a way that can still be economically viable for so many people where they wouldn't be with a 30 to 50% markup.
Exactly, and I think that's an element of, when resale first became sort of a bigger momentum, it wasn't about sustainability and environment. It was about affordability. And then, through the housing crisis, through COVID, people started selling and making clothes from their closet. I just think that you can see how if you take your business and you say, okay, what is the core mission? What do we want to provide? And then how do you make it a longstanding business? And you see what your consumer is going through, what they're interested in, combine that with your mission. And right now we're in the situation where, exactly, we now offer variety, accessibility, and if you are conscious of the environmental impact, there's something there as well.
I also think the key of selling sustainability is messaging and how to communicate and market in a way, because at the beginning, resale clothes was like, I have money, why would I buy someone else's clothes? But we changed the narrative of it's cool, it's unique, no one else will have it. And that's how we need to play and sell sustainability, because we've been selling it in a way that it's boring, dull, not sexy, not chic. We need to just be more creative. How are other industries selling their products? And that's how we need to sell sustainability.
And I think we have to avoid a situation where you're almost guilting people and customers. What we actually need to do is make the sustainable option the more attractive option, the more desirable option, right? Like
Trendy. It needs to be cool. It needs to be trendy.
Well, I feel like what Vestiaire is doing is like they're giving people what they want, which is like unique, one-of-a-kind clothing that isn't in production anymore, but it's actually giving the biosphere what it needs, because we have, these stats that have said that we have enough clothing on this world to dress the next 7 generations. So we don't need to produce any more clothing. So I feel like with everything happening now, the resale market is actually this like great way to be like, hey, this is a great, accessible way to still have a unique personal style, but this is also exactly what the biosphere needs as well.
Exactly.
Like, we don't need to be using your resources.
Exactly. It needs to be, I just did a panel with Kate Young, who's a celebrity stylist. And she was talking about picking pre-loved accessories because they just add an element of uniqueness, and they can really take her clients and have a bit of a unique personality behind it, which is also good for the environment. So I think that's the key, is how do you make those sustainable choices also the better choice?
It's like putting the kale in the dessert and like the brownie. You're like, you want the dessert, but it's also like necessary for your body and for the biosphere. I want to go into, give us like an overview. What is like the current status of the financial market right now?
Oh my goodness.
Easy question.
Well, ladies, as you've seen, we've had an unbelievable volatile market with the tariffs and the situation that's going up, and the market's up 20%, down 10%, now rallying back up and rolling back down. It's going to be an extremely volatile time period right now. But what I can say more broadly, having advised some of the wealthiest families around the world for the last 20 years, is that we are in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in history right at this very moment. So $100 trillion of global wealth is passing to the next gen and the millennials, and women are going to control 30 trillion of that wealth in the next 5 years.
Just got chills.
Wow.
So let me put that into real numbers for you, because this is where it's really exciting. Today, women globally control 1/3 of wealth around the world. In the next 5 years, that's going to be over 50% and growing. Wow. So what does this mean in the wealth management industry? What does this mean for the world at large? It's significant. It is one of the most significant shifts of behavior that I have witnessed in my 20 years in wealth management, and it's coming full force. So what are we seeing and hearing from the next generation, the millennials, women around the world? It's no longer about performance and percentages and zeros on their statements. It's about performance and impact. Performance and purpose, performance and legacy. So all of the things that they want to do good with their money. They want to feel good about the way that they're investing. And what better way to do that than to think about how do we solve the world's most challenging problems, particularly as it pertains to the environment, as it pertains to gender, as it pertains to many other causes that people feel passionately about. And what we did was to make sure that our clients around the world, whether they're in Singapore, in Dubai, in Saudi, in Europe, in LATAM, wherever, Mexico and Brazil, that they had access to different ways to express those views. And so what's going to happen in the asset management investment industry in the next couple of years, the next few years, you'll see this fast and furiously, is that the portfolios are not going to be called what used to be called ESG, that it's going to be core. Everything that we've discussed just now with the three of you and hearing about sustainable and fashion, well, that extends much more broadly. It extends to clean energy. It extends to the idea that fossil fuels will eventually become clean sources of energy, and clients and families are thinking about how do I participate in the long-term growth of that, whether it's nuclear fusion, whether it's solar, whether it's battery, so many different ways to participate in the eco-cycle that's going to make a massive impact to our world, because what are they caring about? What do people care about? They care about their children, their grandchildren. They care about leaving the world a better place for future generations. And that's going to come across more poignantly and more powerfully than I think we've ever seen.
Wow.
I love that.
So exciting.
I know. I feel like we should cheer that.
Well, according to Project Drawdown, educating women and having women leadership is actually one of the top 10 climate solutions. So yes. I'm like, yes, indeed. I love that. So I want to ask this group, so what are the economic benefits of investing in climate long term? Because everyone sees it as this like responsibility and an afterthought, but what are the economic, the business benefits of investing in climate long term over the short term losses, basically?
And to be honest with you, I think that if you're not thinking about this, you're not going to take advantage of the future growth that's going to happen in the next decade. I think it's so important that you think about long-term investment horizons, not short-term investment horizons. All the advancements that are happening in clean energy, sustainability, et cetera, around the world are going to increase the GDP globally for our countries around the world. We can't look at the near-term impacts of the tariffs right now and the near-term impacts against solar, EV, and some of the precious metals that we've been hearing about. Those are short-term. We're talking about long-term transformative technologies and ways to better our society, our planets, increase productivity around the world. So you can't not talk about it, and you can't be short-sighted. And one of the things that we are very grateful for is the fact that we always take a long-term strategic view. We don't make short-term gut reactions about anything. So as long as you take that, steady state, you have the vision of what the path is going to look like going forward, we don't pay too much attention to the near-term noise. And that is true about portfolio allocation to its truest sense. Making sure that you have the right portfolio that reflects the views of your clients around the world and sticking to it. I'll just give you a real life example of this, Sophia. One of our clients in Southeast Asia, she told me, and this is a very large and significant family, she told me that she believes that plastics are the nuclear waste of our century. So she wanted to express the view on that, and we built her a stock portfolio of 30 companies to express that view. So these are the types of real actionable ways to express the views of our families around the world, doing good for the world, doing good for the planet, not compromising on returns, but doing purpose-led investments.
Yeah, they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
No, they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Lauren, what are some of the biggest misconceptions around investing in nature-based solutions that you've seen?
I focus on the early stages where it's really hard for companies to grow and scale, and many of these climate companies are hitting this valley of death because a lot of the capital that would go into scaling them or operating at a loss is no longer available. 5-10 years ago, companies could exist at significant negative EBITDA and still continue to raise money, which is no longer the case, especially now in this world, in this economy, with this president. And so I think there is this misconception that climate companies cannot be profitable. But there are many examples of companies growing and creating significant wealth. I think you just have to prospect a little bit harder to find them.
And I would just add, from a financial perspective, a lot of the misconception is if I'm going to invest in ESG-related investments, that I'm going to have to compromise on returns. And the reality is you absolutely don't have to compromise on returns. So there needs to be some education around the fact that you can do good and you can do good on your investments portfolio as well.
I also think education is key because a lot of people are just thinking like, oh, it's good because I need to say that I do something in sustainability, but it's your future. It's your children's future. Will you have clean water? Will you have clean air? Will you have electricity? And it's all these things that we're not talking about. We're focusing on the financial part and the money, but we're not talking that if we don't do this, can you be outside? Can you go to the beach? Can you go to the forest? So I think education is a huge part of it, and how we're communicating why we should be investing in this is also a huge part, because we're not touching the points that will make people double think like, oh, actually, I should be interested in this because it is going to affect my health. My children won't have this, and all these different things.
I also think we've been missing the forest for the trees in a very large way in terms of how we've focused on capitalizing the mitigation of climate change. Historically, we've put the majority of climate capital, like I mentioned before, into carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is really hard to make money off of. Also, with carbon dioxide, it lives in the atmosphere for 300 to 1,000 years. And so even if you stopped emitting all carbon dioxide today, you'd still have these long-tail climactic impacts. The same is not true for methane. It's 30% of what drives current warming, and it only exists in the atmosphere for 12 years. So if we turn off the tap of methane today, 12 years later, we could significantly reduce global temperatures. My perspective is carbon dioxide mitigation and long-term climate change is a problem solvable by technology. Technology needs to advance, AI computing needs to advance to be able to scale these large-scale carbon dioxide mitigation projects that can actually create a sustained climatic environment. The issue is we don't necessarily have time. And the only way that we can buy time is by reducing warming today, bending the curve today, and the only way that we can do that is with methane. And so we've really been misallocating capital in terms of how we reduce warming, how we reduce global temperatures. And like I mentioned, methane's received under 2% of climate capital, responsible for 30% of current warming, and you can mitigate it, significantly reduce it, or eliminate it at no cost, low cost, or even negative cost. And what's so interesting about methane, capturing it and utilizing it as energy is incredibly profitable. And I think in shifting that narrative and investing more in methane, we'll start to realize the short-term gains, both financially and environmentally, that helps to create a new narrative around the benefits of climate change mitigation.
I do think we're in like the next wave of climate action and sustainability, and what that means, it's like sustainability is living, breathing, ideology of a word. It's not just like this finite thing. And now we're in this next phase, which is so exciting. And as you were saying, like reframing that transfer of wealth. What is wealth? Is wealth a capital? It goes down to just like a dollar amount, or there's ecological wealth too, not just financial wealth. And there's not just a massive transfer of generational wealth. I want a massive transfer of ecological wealth. I would rather my kids have access to clean water, clean air, and clean food.
And I think what's interesting is two other things are happening alongside. One is that it's not even about kids anymore. Like I think people are starting to feel and experience some of the impact, whether it's the fires on the West Coast, whether it's the flooding, the storms. And so I think what's happening is there's an acceleration where it's no longer this thing that's going to happen in the future. And then at the same time, technology and AI is rapidly moving at a pace that we are now moving much faster from one phase to the next in terms of how our life is changing and how we're searching, how we're using technology. And so you have both of those combined, plus everything that we're talking about with investment and the fact that you can now see results in your lifetime. It's no longer something that's in the future that won't be there when you're around. I think the mixture of that is what will change a lot of business approach.
1 in 4 Americans have already personally experienced a climate disaster in their backyard. Vestiaire Collective was originally founded in 2009 and was very ahead of its time for pre-loved fashion. And then recently became the first French unicorn. It was the first French business valued at over 1 billion, founded by women. So you guys were so ahead of its time. Like what do businesses need to understand and innovate with for the next 15 years to stay relevant?
And we were also the first resale business to be B Corp, which was a huge accomplishment. I think when Vestiaire started, it was combining some things that were already there and customers were craving, and also some things that the founders were sort of looking ahead and saying, we feel like this is coming. So in our case, we were combining community with trust, right? Like, how do we build a community of people that can engage, like items? This was around the time when social media was really starting to garner. And then actually, the idea of circular fashion has always been part of the mission. And the reason it was part of the mission, 2 of the co-founders came from the fashion industry, and they personally had experience with either, working in luxury houses where quality was such a focus area, or seeing the benefits of vintage and sort of growing up in a world where Fanny, our co-founder, her mother loved vintage and kind of did all the storytelling. And they were able to combine it. And so the fashion and technology were combined. The sustainability was always there. It just became more relevant later. So I think that's what businesses now need to look at. It's like, what are you trying to build? Who are you building it for? What's important to them? What's your mission as a business? And looking ahead, if you're really agile and watching your customer and saying, okay, not just what's important for them now, but how do you make their life a little bit better? Or how do you service them in a different way? You will start to capture some of those trends. So the trends that I would say are the most kind of prominent right now are technology. We're all experiencing AI as just how we live life, how we search for things. And I think there's a lot more that's going to happen with shopping and curation and discovery and the purchase experience, and how do you fuse that with this new technology? And I think there's some companies out there that are really starting to play around with it. But on the business side, I think AI is also going to help improve how we run and operate businesses, how we do creative, how we have marketing. I mean, we've done some AI-generated campaigns. We had Sophia, I know we've talked about this before, we had a ban fast fashion campaign where we said we're gonna take fast fashion off our platform, but the goal was to really raise awareness around the fact that there were 92 million tons of fashion textile waste that gets sent to landfills globally from the fashion industry. And so we used AI to create imagery to show what it would look like if that waste was in Times Square, in front of the Eiffel Tower, Buckingham Palace. So I think there's also ways for AI to be creative, how we operate businesses. And over time, they say that there's going to be a lot more about forecasting demand and then looking internally at processes and optimizations so that we're in a world where AI is not just bringing, additional technology, but it's bringing insight that will allow us to produce the amount that we need versus overconsumption. So I think there's so much more that's going to happen in that. So in terms of riding the business, the wave the next 15 years, there's a lot of opportunities in there.
I think that's just an example of the reality that technology really will get us out of this mess alive. It's more just how bad do things need to get before they get better. And that is a choice. It's a choice in terms of who we elect as our president, where we put our money, what we're doing in the short term, that will really determine how bad things are before they get better.
Yeah, I think tech just helps us buy more time. Like there's tech-based solutions and there's nature-based solutions. And a lot of times the tech-based solutions are just enabling the nature-based solutions and scaling them at a level that we can't naturally. But Marina, I want to talk about how true movements happen from culture and community, not by the dollar. Like you can't buy a movement. So what is like the role that art and creativity plays in driving this forward?
I think you can see now Gen Z and the younger generation are really driving the sustainability movement, and everyone in the sustainable space, it's mainly women driving the space, and they're using art, they're using education, and we're trying to find creative ways of getting all the different people into the table, talking about how can we bring technology, how can we bring education, how can we bring arts, brands, investment to make a difference and make a change.
Everyone's work here is going to outlast multiple administrations, all the political wins. So what's a key lesson that you've learned in strategic disruption in your work that you would want to bestow upon all of us?
I would say the best thing we can do is try to instill this atmosphere of agility and entrepreneurial attitude, even in larger organizations, even in larger teams. Like, how do you, we spend so much time at work, we're all driving towards a mission, but how do we cultivate an internal environment that's really about bringing new ideas to the table, being agile, reacting when things are happening? We had a crazy week of tariffs coming and going. Our team had a lot of work to do around that. But I really think there's an opportunity to have that agility and entrepreneurial spirit, no matter how big, no matter what industry you're in. And it also forces everybody to stay in tune with what's happening in the environment versus kind of having that internal thinking only.
I actually have a friend who have dubbed agility quotient like your AQ. Like there's IQ, EQ, emotional, your EQ, and then there's an AQ, and she's writing a whole book about it, but actually AQ is for our modern world the most important thing to have.
I always say DQ, decency quotient.
Oh, decency quotient, that's good.
Always.
I think
DQ.
So the whole alphabet combination of DQ and AQ
are exactly what you need. Recipe for success.
And EQ.
Yes. Ooh, that is a good children's book. Lauren, do you have any thoughts?
I've been focusing on climate my whole career and really am trying to drive home the importance of taking a step back from the narrow focus of carbon dioxide and opening up our understanding to the fact that carbon dioxide is only half of the story of what's driving warming, that there are other gases like methane, nitrous oxide, and so just taking the time to learn about these climate pollutants and educate those around you in a really constructive and positive way can make a really big difference. And I think also that large change doesn't need to happen by moving large masses of opinions, very powerful things can happen with individual conversations and in small rooms with people who are very passionate about these causes. And so it's not about convincing everyone, it's having these powerful conversations and coming to an understanding, and one person can impact one person, and then change happen.
Yeah, your strategic disruption is reminding us that one person can make a difference, which I love. And I got this from you, from a quote that you said, that you don't believe in change just for the sake of change. You believe in strategic disruption. So what does that strategic disruption look like?
So what that means to me, Sophia, is that we have a long-term vision. Everyone understands that vision. There's a lot of changes, ups and downs, and volatility that happens between now and that set vision, but that we spend the ample amount of time educating, making sure that everything that we've already talked about is well known and understood, and staying the course, because we are at a pivotal moment, as I mentioned earlier, right at this very time. And it's very important for us all to make an impact. And look, I think it's important that we all lead with purpose, and that we all lead with impact, and that we make our mark on this world. So again, staying the course, having that long-term vision, understanding, explaining, educating around it, and staying the course.
I love that. What is that long-term vision? Like, what does that look like to you?
The long-term vision for me as a executive in wealth management for the last 20 years is that we put capital into doing wonderful things for the world, capital that's going to influence the world in positive ways, doing good, leading a really nice sort of purpose-driven investments portfolios for our clients around the world. That's going to make a significant difference. And I think you heard me say already how optimistic I am about the changes and the opportunities that are already happening.
Marina, what do you?
I don't know what to add. Do you basically, but I think education, like if you don't know you're doing something wrong, you can't be part of the solution. So I really think education is a huge one. And then I'm more in the creative space and thinking outside of the box, because everyone's doing this. So how do you get this problem and think outside of the box for the solution? And then I really think it's joining forces with the different players. If you work in the fashion industry, you need to talk to the people creating the material. You need to talk to the investment. You really need to talk to the different factors and bring them to the table, instead of just being like in your corner talking to everyone that does the same thing as you.
I couldn't agree more. I have to say collaboration, partnership, openness to dialogue, listening well. I mean, that's part of this journey together too.
There's just so many elements of creativity and storytelling that are needed for people to understand the impact and what that mission should be.
And understand the problem, especially, because art can speak every language. Exactly. But a report is very boring and no one's gonna read it. So I really think just joining, bringing everyone to the table and not leaving out anyone. Like really, artists may not know the issues, but they can find creative solutions to talk about the issues.
When you're talking about collaboration, in nature, they call it cross-pollination. Yes. And I just always think about, I always think about an ecosystem. The most biodiverse and robust ecosystem are ones that had the most cross-pollination. So it's like, we're just a reflection of nature. Like we shouldn't be in our silos.
By the way, look at what we're doing today.
Yeah, look at what we're doing.
This is cross-pollination.
All right, ladies, happy Earth Month.
Happy
Cheers. Cheers, happy Earth Month. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to STEWARD Podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, please share with friends and family who are also grappling with these complex questions. As STEWARD, we believe that understanding these challenges is the first step towards creating a more sustainable and joyful present and future. Take a moment to rate and review STEWARD Podcast wherever you listen, and you can also stay connected with us on Instagram at steward.media for more updates. See you next time.